Welcome to the Carousel of Happiness podcast. I'm your host, Allie Wagner. On last week's episode, I took you on a tour of the Carousel of Kindness. On today's episode, I'm going to give you a little bit more information about the Carousel of Kindness, how it relates to the Carousel of Happiness, and how it relates to some of the ideas I've been reading and pondering this week. This episode is a little bit different. I don't have anything prepared ahead of time. We are going to smush these ideas together. We're going to make connections in real time, and we're going to trust that exactly what needs to be expressed today in this moment will be expressed. You can trust that you're coming to this podcast episode for a reason, that there's something here for you to learn or understand, or to know. And let's see what happens. Let us begin with today's story. On last week's episode, I took you on a tour of the Carousel of Kindness. On last week's episode, I held your hand, and together we walked into the circle of 5 animals, sitting together in quiet, sitting together there in peace. And we sat together with them, one by one, moving from animal to animal, reflecting on what these animals can teach us, and how they can help us relearn what it's like to be without doing, to be without expectation, to be without having to buy something else. And there was a reason why I took you through the Carousel of Kindness the way that I did. The reason that I took you through the Carousel of Kindness, emotion by emotion, feeling by feeling, thought by thought, is because I wanted you to feel that space. I wanted you to feel what it feels like to sit with Scott's animals and meditate and be and connect to them, to you, to something higher, to whatever. And I'll admit, I have a shameless reason for doing so. I have a very selfish reason to justify why I gave you that tour the way that I did. Because the truth is, the Carousel of Kindness is a real place. It is a real place without a place. It is a real installation that Scott Harrison carved a couple of years ago, and it's an installation that is looking for a home. A temporary home, a permanent home, a place that it can exist to hold space for those to feel the way that you felt last episode. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the origin story of the Carousel of Kindness and how it relates to some of the things that I've been reading this week. And normally on these podcast weeks, I will sit down and I will take pen to paper and I will smush some of these ideas together. I will make connections in certain ways. And quite frankly, this week, it was just not happening. It was not happening because I was getting caught in those routine ways of showing up, right? We know how to show up for certain things that we do regularly. And for many, many iterations, that's fine. But those tendencies tend to get in our way if they're blocking authentic expression. If they're blocking us from genuinely expressing ourselves in this moment the way that we'd like to be expressed in this moment, not necessarily in last week's moment or the week before. And so as I was sitting down to put pen to paper, it was very, very painful. And I've learned many things from Scott, and one of those things is not to force things. If you're at this pivot point when you can make things harder, don't. And it's something that he's naturally done, it's seemingly easily throughout the creation of the carousel and other later artistic works. But it's something that I really have to teach myself, because I was raised in a household where if you were, how do I put this? I was raised in a household that you needed to prove your worth. You needed to prove your worth by marks on the chart. You needed to prove your worth by the effort that you put into something. If something was difficult, then it was worthwhile. And yes, I'm saying this aloud and it seems insane, but sometimes we pick up beliefs along the way and we're not exactly sure. We're not exactly sure they're not true until we give ourselves permission to make them not true. And so what I'm going to do on this episode is we're going to try to smush things together as I'm standing in front of this microphone. In real time, I'm going to trust that all I need to do in this moment is show up. All I need to do in this moment is show up and be present and allow myself to authentically express the way that I want to express, and trust the process. That you, dear listener, are going to get what you need out of this. And I am going to have the opportunity to express myself in a way that overlaps with what the carousel requires and needs of me this week. So, where were we? I don't know. We're flying by the seat of our pants. So the Council of Kindness. The origin story of the Council of Kindness is that Scott was observing how many people would experience the Carousel of Happiness. He was observing how they would experience the carousel with the lights and the sounds and the Wurlitzer band organ and the colors and the stained glass window, all of these sensory details. And for many, many people, they would walk into the carousel house. And if you're listening to this podcast, you know, because you've likely been there, that all of those sensory details can combine and make a very satisfying, joyful, fun experience. That what Scott has done with all of those little details is encouraged people when they walk through the door to tune themselves to the frequency of the carousel. And for many of us, that frequency of the carousel is a little bit more fun than our typical frequency. The day-to-day vibration that we're emitting. And so when we walk through the carousel doors and we experience the lights, the sounds, the laughter, the noise, it allows us to entrain. So we adjust our frequency to match it and we feel better. But Scott also noticed that there were people that walked through the carousel doors and all of that noise and those sounds and those people, it was too much. He noticed that for some people, they felt very, very overwhelmed in the carousel environment. And there's one thing that is probably the most important thing to Scott when it comes to, and this is my personal opinion, this is not his, but it's really important to Scott that his work be accessible to everybody. Regardless of how you move in your body, regardless of how you experience the world, he wants you to be able to experience his work equally. So he decided that he would create a circle of animals that would be devoid of sound, that would not have all of the sparkly color and the movement and the people. And this circle would allow people to sit with these animals and reflect. To sit with them in quiet and contemplate, to sit with them and be in their presence, to absorb their energy, to absorb their medicine. Because if you think about it, this is the first way that Scott experienced the animals, all of the animals on the carousel. He sat with them one by one, by himself, over the course of the 3 to 6 months that it would take him to carve these animals. He sat with all of these animals in quiet contemplation as he learned from them. He learned how to carve from them. He learned how to be human from them. He learned how to be with his thoughts and his feelings as a result of being in their presence. And that was something he wanted to bring to everybody else. He wanted people to experience these animals in the way that he, in the first iterations, experienced them himself. And so the Carousel of Kindness was Scott's second major artistic project and was completed a couple of years ago. And for reasons that are outside the scope of this podcast, we thought it had a home, and then we thought it had another home, and now it doesn't have a home. The Carousel of Kindness is a place without a place, so to speak. It does not exist accessible via a subterranean staircase underneath the carousel. Although Scott did contemplate whether or not he'd be able to dig a hole underneath the carousel after last week's episode, but I don't think that's going to be an option. So the Carousel of Kindness exists, but as of right now, it only exists in our minds because there's not a physical place for it to be just yet. And this brings me to something that I was researching and learning on my own this week that I think is related to the Carousel of Kindness, but I couldn't figure out how to put it on paper. And so now I'm going to try to talk through it with you in real time right now. I have been reading the work of Neville Goddard. Neville Goddard was born in Barbados, although he spent a lot of time in the United States. He was a writer and a spiritual teacher whose work was primarily active in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. And there's this idea that Neville Goddard came up with or was a proponent of, which is this idea that our imagination creates our reality. If we can imagine something, it can become real in this real life experience. That our imagination is a portal, it's a doorway to anything that we want to create. And that was part of the reason that I presented the Carousel of Kindness the way that I did without realizing that's why I was doing it, is that I want you now, then, to feel what it feels like to be in that space. And I wanted you to feel what it feels like to be in that space because I know, according to Neville Goddard, if you can imagine what he describes as your wish fulfilled, if you can imagine the end result of the thing that you want in this lifetime, be it creating a carousel, be it creating a relationship, be it creating wealth and abundance. If you can, with your imagination, which was given to you, built in your human operating system, if you can use that imagination to feel what it feels like to be in your wish fulfilled, that wish must be fulfilled. It must. For reasons that we might talk about in this podcast, but if you have any questions, feel free to email me. So, your imagination, specifically the feelings you are able to rustle up in your body, those feelings are your gateway to where you want to go. So I know that we are looking for a home for the Carousel of Kindness. We are. We had a couple of homes that didn't work out. Now we're looking for a home. And I knew that if I could get all of you to feel what it feels like for that to be a place, that's going to start to shift the energy. And that's going to bring a place for the Carousel of Kindness. And you can do this with anything in your life. If there's something that you wish to create, you can, and this is Neville Goddard's recommendation, is to, right before you're going to sleep, you're lying down in your bed and you imagine what it's like to have that thing that matters most to you. But not just think about it. The trick is your feelings. The trick is to allow your body to feel what it feels like to have that $1 million, or to feel what it feels like to have that partner in your bed, to feel it, because those feelings are actually being broadcast out by your nervous system. And it's being broadcast out by your nervous system so that people that can help you fulfill this wish start to come your way. And if we can emit that sonar, that frequency out to the world, I am a wealthy person, I am a wealthy person, I am a wealthy person, all of a sudden you have people, synchronicities, timing, events coming toward you in order to fulfill that wish. It's really that simple. Now, the trick is, how do you feel like a millionaire when you look around your life and there is not much champagne and caviar in your experience? And that's the trick. How do you navigate this three-dimensional reality? So what you're experiencing right now is basically a representation of what you have been thinking regularly. There's a phrase, as within, so without. The feelings, emotions, and thoughts we have inside our body express themselves externally in our experience. So as an example, if you think that everybody drives slow on the peak to peak, sure enough, you're going to be behind all of those slow drivers on the peak to peak. And so how can we start to feel the way that we want to feel the way that it feels to be the millionaire with the partner and the flexibility and the freedom and all those things that you want? How can you hold on to that feeling while your three-dimensional reality catches up? And it's that minding of the gap, so to speak. How can you feel in this moment your wish fulfilled, even if there are examples in your everyday life that demonstrate that it's not true? And there was something that he said. Let me see if I can find it. Maybe. Hang on. Oh, this is it. Faith is the ability to feel something into being. Faith is active. Faith is not passive. In every single moment, you need to choose the feeling that you want. If you are not feeling good right now, your sonar is emitting a frequency that is going to bring you more yucky stuff. And some of this was Neville Goddard. Some of this is now modern science that's been able to corroborate some of this stuff. And the truth is, I don't want to convince you of anything. I want to present an idea to you that you explore on your own and feel whether or not you feel resonance. If you feel resonance with some of these ideas and you want to play with them, go play with them. If you think all of this stuff is crazy, then it's all crazy. Nothing I am going to do or say is going to convince you of that. And so, getting back to the Carousel of Kindness, getting back to this idea that you can wish something quite literally into being. If you can train yourself every night as you're going to sleep, if you can imagine that wish fulfilled as you're going to sleep, and this is something that Neville Goddard recommended back in the 30s and 40s that now modern science has caught up with. And this idea that when you're in, I believe it's a hypnagogic state, but when you're transitioning from wakefulness to sleep, your brain waves are slowing down. Most of the time we exist in beta state where we're active, and as we start to slow down, maybe through meditation, maybe through falling asleep, we go into the alpha state. And this alpha state is the creative state. It's the meditative state. If you've gotten good ideas in the shower, chances are you are in an alpha state. This is the state that writers like to be in, artists like to be in. This is the state where you can feel what's called the muse, or athletes call the zone. That's what this alpha state is. And when those brain waves start to slow down, we have more access to our subconscious. We have more access to our subconscious so that we can get ideas, we can get impulses, we can get inspiration that we can take out into our three-dimensional life. So you might have had this experience, it happens to me all the time, where you go into meditation and you sit and you're quiet, and then all of a sudden, pop, something comes into your mind. Maybe it's that you need to call somebody. Maybe it's that you need to go do that thing right now. And I want to be careful about this because our minds are always going, right? And so the key is that if you get in that baseline quiet state, if you know that your mind isn't going all over the place, then when you get one of these ideas, you can trust that it came from somewhere else. Your subconscious, God, source, whatever you want to call it, the good idea fairy, whatever. And so the key is if you can keep your mind quiet, these ideas and impulses start to surface, and you can act on those in your three-dimensional life, and that is the way that things get closer and closer and closer to you. So how do we navigate this gap between where we're feeling, where we want to go, and our external reality? Well, something you can do is that you can assume, if you know you have a limiting belief, let's use the example of all drivers on the peak to peak drive slowly. That's a limiting belief. It's a limiting belief if I want to be able to move freely along the highway as I get to work, right? So, my belief that all drivers on the peak to peak is a limiting belief. I can take that limiting belief and I can flip it on its head. And I can say, you know what? It's pretty easy for me to drive without encumbrance on the peak to peak. I can drive on the peak to peak and not be impacted by people who, in my mind, are driving too slow. And then what you can do is you can find evidence in your three-dimensional life that proves this to be true. You can remember those times you've driven and not gotten behind a very slow camper that is not designed for these roads. You can remember that time that you were able to drive so swiftly, maybe you got a ticket, right? And what we do is this, if we assume that something is true and then we give our minds the task of looking to find where those assumptions are true, that's how we can change those limiting beliefs. That's how we can take something that's previously been this big roadblock in our experience and we can figure out a way around it. Assuming it's true and then giving our mind the homework of proving that to be true. And then slowly, gradually over time, our external reality matches up more closely with this internal reality. And those are some of the ideas that have been bonking all through my mind this week. I really want to find a home for the Council of Kindness. And I'll tell you why. Because that is the way that I experience the Carousel of Happiness. I am in a unique position where the Carousel of Happiness is my place of employment, which means sometimes the noise in that place is difficult. Sometimes all of the laughter and the joy is challenging in order for it to be somewhere where I can think and focus and be, right? But I'm in a unique position also because the Carousel of Happiness is my place of employment, which means I have a key. And I also tend to wake up earlier than my coworkers. So I like to go into the carousel when there's nobody else there. And I love to step onto that platform, and usually I sit next to the gorilla, but not always, and to sit with those animals, to feel their presence, to not have to write anything about them, not have to do anything with them, right? When I'm at the carousel and it's going, chances are I'm at work. I've got stuff that I have to do. I have obligations just like everybody else. I have expectations that I need to fulfill. But when I go to the Carousel of Happiness and I sit in that circle with those animals, they don't ask anything of me. They don't demand anything of me. And I get to experience that place the way many of you experience it in the middle of the day when it's chock full of laughter and fun and joy. I want the Council of Kindness to be a place in real life where I can go, because that's the way that I enjoy and experience the animals. That's the way I love Scott's work. And I got to tell you, I sit with that gorilla 10 minutes, 5 minutes, sometimes more, sometimes less. Sometimes I cry for no reason. Sometimes I tell them all of these things for no reason. Sometimes I don't say anything at all. And there's magic in the energy of those animals. And I want other people to experience it. Put it this way. I want other people to experience it or have the opportunity to experience it the way that I have. Through sitting and being and having these animals reteach me how to be and not have to do. The truth is, we are human beings, not human doings. And those animals don't ask anything of me. They don't expect anything of me. They allow me, they hold space for me to be me. And I don't know about you, but there are very few places in this world, this busy, busy, busy world, where I can feel that. And also, I do not think it's a coincidence. Remember the George Harrison episode a couple of weeks ago. It is not a coincidence that I happen to be reading Neville Goddard this week, leading up to, notably, last week's episode. That was not the episode I planned as an introduction for the Council of Kindness, but I now see why that happened, why it needed to happen that way, why I was drawn to it expressing itself in that way. I think a lot of times human beings, myself included, we want to micromanage everything. We want to know how everything relates and when it's going to come to fruition and that. But there's value, as I'm learning, in keeping our mind's eye, so to speak, on where you want to go, but letting go of the attachments of how it is fulfilled. Letting go of the attachments of when it's going to be fulfilled. If you turn those details over to the universe, over to God, over to whomever, maintain that lighthouse, as it were, maintain that beacon of where you want to go. And then allow it to be presented to you in a way that's juicy and fun and silly and joyful and whatever adjectives mean the most to you. And so that's the Council of Kindness. The Council of Kindness is like the Carousel of Happiness. They are cousins to one another, but it's an opportunity for you to experience the energy of Scott's work in a different context. And I know that it's profound because I've had the opportunity to sit with the Council of Kindness animals, but mostly to sit with the Carousel of Happiness animals alone. Just me. And what a relief that is. What sensations of ease and joy and worthiness I'm able to absorb when I sit with these animals. And I want more people to feel that way. And so that's why I shared the Council of Kindness the way that I did. And here's the thing. Somebody out of all of you that listen to this, you're going to know of a good place. And if you listen to that inner guidance, if you say, you know what, maybe I'll send her an email. Maybe I'll stop by the carousel. I got a crazy idea. That's what the Council of Kindness needs, is that energy moving. And that's what the Carousel of Happiness had since the beginning. Scott put out his little lighthouse, his beacon. Hey, this is me. This is what I want to create. And out that energy radiated and then pinged back on collaborators and money and synchronicities that made this happen. And that's what I want to do with the Council of Kindness. I'm putting it out there. The Council of Kindness is looking for a home. And this was the first step in it coming to fruition. I will keep you updated on any zigs or zags or any jumps or turns in the route. But that's my mission, is to bring that Council of Kindness to quite frankly, the place that it has been waiting for it. It is my belief that those other places didn't work out because it was waiting for its place. And I want to be part of the creation of this place. And so I'm going to keep thinking of that wish fulfilled. I'm going to keep feeling into what it feels like to have a quiet, reflective place where people can sit and be in presence with these animals and in turn have their life changed in similar ways to the Carousel of Happiness. That is my mission. That is my goal. And I appreciate all of you for being present with me right now as I try to figure out how these ideas relate. I appreciate your time and your energy in being with me as it all unfolds and allowing me to be messy, allowing me to run off onto different tangents or say the same thing over and over again. I appreciate your grace. And I can't wait to share with you the next step in this fulfillment of this wish. In the meantime, take care. Be well. And as we like to say at the Carousel of Happiness, don't delay joy. And we'll see you next time around.
Beginnings and endings are only pretendings. I'll see you next time around. I'll see